Hey there, in this video, I'm going to explain some of the basics about myocardial bridges and how they affect the artery to create endothelial dysfunction, which then causes vasospasms. So it's a chain of cause and effect. It's one of the most common issues with myocardial bridges, is that people with significant myocardial bridges, almost all of them, if the bridge is significant, have some level of vasospasms, whether they're mild or severe. So let's take a look at the diagram because a lot of times on our website, on the Facebook support group, we talk about vasospasms and endothelial dysfunction, but unless you really see it, it doesn't always make a lot of sense. So there's some things where people talk around and around sometimes, but until you see it, we can't get a common grip. And once you see it, then a lot of things just become obvious. So we can look on the left side. What is a vasospasm? Well, it's a spasm in an artery. So you see the picture of a normal artery at the top, blood flows coming through nice and easy through that garden hose, so to speak, and the artery's wide. Patent. Patent in medical terms means wide, like wide open. So if it says on your report, the artery looks patent, that means the artery is like it should be, wide open. But when an artery is having a vasospasm, it means the artery is like temporarily constricting. It's like squeezing at that moment. And you can see at the bottom picture over here that that's what's happening in the middle of this artery. For some reason, now it could be different reasons for vasospasms, which we're going to get into, but for some reason that artery is constricting, and that's causing reduced blood flow through the artery. So I want to be clear that one of the misconceptions is that that constricting right there, just the crushing of the artery like that, or the constricting of the artery, is not actually directly what we're talking about when the bridge is squeezing itself. When the myocardial bridge, which is a band of muscle over the artery, compresses the artery, that's compression, but this vasospasm is when the artery itself squeezes. Okay, not that something is squeezing it from the outside, compressing it. That's additional squeezing, which can make it be crushed. A vasospasm was when the actual, like the body, the flesh of the artery itself, it squeezes and contracts. And why would it do that? It's a question, right? So we'll talk about that. And to be clear, if you look at the bottom of the picture on the left, you can see that these spasms don't have to happen in the heart arteries, the coronary arteries that go around the heart, that feed the heart. It could, but that's a common place. But it can happen just about anywhere in your body, happen in your extremities, arms, legs, anywhere really in your body. This could happen. So there are a number of reasons why people have vasospasms. It could be all kinds of things that lead to it. But at some level, it has something to do with the lining of the artery, okay, which stops working right, at least temporarily. And the lining of the artery, we go to the right side picture, it's called the endothelium. So the root word endo, right, that prefix means inside, right? So the inner lining. So here you see the inner lining of the artery here is called the endothelium. So something in the endothelium stops working right, which makes the artery constrict in a vasospasm. And so on the right side, you see what it's supposed to happen. And we can compare what's supposed to happen in a normal situation to what actually happens with a vasospasm. So what's supposed to happen, which is in the bottom right picture, is that the endothelium, that lining, contains little receptors in it. There's little receptors in the lining of your artery that their job is to pick up signals from nitric oxide, okay, which nitric oxide is carried by the blood. It goes through. As the blood goes through, the nitric oxide goes through as well. And that's why doctors will often tell you to, eat more nitrates in your food from certain vegetables and beets and stuff like that. Or they'll give you nitric oxide pills, right? One or the other or both, because they want more nitric oxide, like you see in the picture down on the right there, to send more signals to the receptors on the endothelium, because when those receptors receive the nitric oxide and the signal, then they say, oh, open the artery, widen that artery, make it more relaxed. So you notice that as you go from the picture on the left to the picture on the right, the artery has gotten wider. It's expanded. That's what's supposed to happen. when nitric oxide is reached by those is connects with those receptors in the endothelium. So, for example, if you're under some kind of stress, or you're running, or your heart rate goes up, whatever, then more blood's pumping through. You get more nitric oxide coming through. It's sending more signals. The artery says, "Oh, I need to expand to let more blood flow through to accommodate for this stress," and it does exactly that. Okay, so that's what's a normal functioning of the endothelium, which is the place where it gets the signals for the nitric oxide to expand the artery. So what happens in the vasospasm? Because if you notice, the vasospasm is almost like the opposite of that. Instead of widening, the artery will contract on itself. Again, not just from a myocardial bridge crushing it, but from the actual artery itself constricting. So what makes it do that? Well, in medicine in general, it could be many causes of endothelial dysfunction. It could be due to high homocysteine levels, which is coming from certain proteins overload and things like that. It could be from too much sugar in your diet, glycation. It gets stuck all over the inside of your arteries, etc. It could be from smoking and the damage that that does to vessels. It could be from fibrin and all these many different things they can be. But in the case of myocardial bridges, why are they associated with endothelial dysfunction and spasms? Well, basically, what Stanford believes, and which seems to be just common sense, is that with a myocardial bridge, obviously you're squeezing on an artery, like stepping on the garden hose, every heartbeat for a lifetime. It's congenital, so you have a myocardial bridges come with when you're born, so before you're born. So you've been crushing that artery every heartbeat, every day, every week, every month, every year for your entire life. Obviously, that's going to beat up the artery. It's going to make it more weakened. And so that includes the endothelium, right? The lining of for the artery here is just going to be weakened and start to not work right. So that the receptors that are supposed to normally pick up the signals from nitric oxide to then open and expand the artery, they're not going to work right. So what happens? Well, the nitric oxide comes through, but they don't get the message. The message doesn't get through to the receptors in the endothelium. And a lot of times what happens is the opposite of what you need. The nitric oxide wants to tell the endothelium, hey, expand, expand, but instead it does the opposite. It collapses, it contracts like this. Okay, so you get a spasm when you actually needed the artery to expand. So this is why when someone's under stress or they try to exercise, for example, or they have something else that makes their heart rate go up, some kind of stress, just when they need their artery to expand, instead it goes and kind of clenches, you know? And when you have a vasospasm, it literally feels like sometimes it feels like a shaking, like a spasm. I know because I had multiple vasospasms on multiple arteries because I had seven bridges unroofed, seven myocardial bridges. Okay, so it's the mechanical action they believe of just a simple pounding on an artery for a lifetime, every heartbeat, that causes the endothelium to just be beat up, mashing on it, right? That those receptors aren't going to work right. And because they don't work right, they're not picking up the signals to expand. And they can actually, arteries can contract, okay? Because when the artery doesn't get the signals, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So when an artery contracts and falls in on itself like that, okay, and gets tighter, like you see in the top left over here, that's bad news. That's like a mini heart attack, especially if it's a really tight contraction. It could actually um, sometimes be very severe. They could last from just a matter of moment, like milliseconds, or very short, to longer ones that last a little bit of a while. So I don't know what the cap on a vasospasm is, but they can be pretty severe. They can send you to the hospital. So if you've had something that felt like a heart attack, and technically it wasn't, then probably was a severe set of vasospasms. There are people who have vasospasms from myocardial bridges causing endothelial dysfunction, like many times per day. Before I had my first surgery, I've had two unroofings. Before I had my first surgery, I had some vasospasms that were just like, I call them showstoppers. Like I'd be teaching a class and just, I'd like stop for a second, turn around, get the class to do something else because I just couldn't It was literally like your whole chest was shaking. You're like, what's going on, And I had no idea what it even was. That's the crazy part. So just knowing that this is what's happening is a very good thing because we know myocardial bridges cause a lot of psychological issues because you're basically having heart attacks or a mini heart attack kind of a thing, um, or something like a heart attack, but slightly less frequently for some people. And to not know what's causing it, to think that it's like, your dog or something in your life is like, it's harrowing, right? Because you don't know where's it coming from? What's causing all this? It's just biology. So what can you do about it? Well, first thing is that when you get unroofed, you stop the mashing. You're no longer crushing the artery. So the artery lining finally has a chance for these endothelial cells here. It's really the cells in the endothelium that need to repair so that they can now pick up the nitric oxide signals properly. And they can repair, generally speaking, it's possible, right? If it's severe damage, it may be hard to repair, but generally speaking, it is possible for endothelium, even after many years, to repair itself. Probably will never be back to like perfect, but it's way better than not, you know. And I can say, my first surgery was in 2018 and now it's 2025, 7 years, that it's way better for me. The spasms are way fewer now, not only in fewer in number, but also much less severe in terms of um, the squeezing and everything. It's much, much less impact. So fewer and less intense spasms for sure for me over time. Some people also report that right after surgery, when I first had surgery, actually I had some more spasms, I would say, just in the immediate weeks after surgery, but then it started to go the other way after that. So it's hard to predict, but that's what has to happen. In other words, people argue a lot about, well, should I get on roofing or not, or does it really help? And bottom line, as long as you can retain that myocardial bridge, you still have this myocardial bridge, you can see, in other words, just look here. Imagine there's a band of muscle on top of this artery, and it's just going bam, 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 and it's just mashing on this artery. You're just going to continue to damage the artery. In other words, don't expect your endothelium to heal up um, without getting rid of the fundamental cause of why it's damaged in the first place. You could take the nitrates and eat the beets and all that stuff, but that's not really changing the fact that the artery continues to be damaged every time your heart beats, right? You need to stop the root cause of the whole thing. Okay. And the only way to get that healing to start is to stop the root cause, and that's to have unroofing surgery. So, am I advising unroofing surgery for every single person who has a myocardial bridge? No, I'm not. Because some people don't have these issues. They don't have severe vasospasms. They don't impact their lives. Some people have mild myocardial bridges that are small or don't have much of an effect, don't press very hard on the artery, so their endothelium is not very damaged. But if you have a myocardial bridge on some artery and you have spasms on that artery, you can virtually guarantee that that myocardial bridge is a cause of those spasms. Right? I've never seen a case out of hundreds of people on our site and papers. I've never seen a case where a myocardial bridge was in a particular artery and there were spasms on that same artery, in that same artery, and those two things had nothing to do with each other. It doesn't even make any sense. And could it also be from smoking and sugar and something? It could be, but I mean, if you have a bridge and spasms in the same artery, clearly the bridge is a major cause of those spasms. Okay, especially if it's a significant bridge. Side note, if a bridge wasn't significant, if it was just really small, they wouldn't have put it on your report. You wouldn't even know you had it, right? Because they'd be too small to report, it'd be like a little thread or something, right? So any kind of significant bridge that's reported could cause spasms usually. So that's a look at what causes the vasospasms, how the myocardial bridge and the chain of causality, the cause and effect. The bridge causes endothelial dysfunction from the pounding of the bridge on the artery. Endothelial cells don't work right. Endothelial dysfunction means that the endothelium doesn't get the nitric oxide signals properly, and then it collapses or contracts and squeezes, and you get these little, almost like a mini heart attack, depending on how severe it is. So the solution to this on the surgery, on the large scale side, is unroofing surgery if it's severe. But you can also try nitric oxide to try to just increase the amount of nitric oxide, hoping that that'll give the signals to the endothelium better. But bottom line, if the endothelium is damaged, then sometimes, the nitric oxide is just not going to be enough. You just need a better lining to your artery. And if the artery is severely damaged, then it might be time for a bypass in addition to the unroofing, to get the bypass because that artery might be so damaged that it's going to permanently spasm. The bypass plus unroofing is sometimes an option. So just one word here at the end here about nitric oxide medications, the pills that they give for nitric oxide. Uh, those are hit and miss depending on the person. There are some people who nitric oxide, they take it and it fixes things better for a while, and it relieves the tension and the spasm and the congestion. But there is a significant number of people who, when they take nitric oxide pills, they actually get worse and actually increases the spasms. So that's very much well known on our site. Several of the most prominent people on our site have had that happen, that they took nitric oxide sometimes for years, thinking they were making things better, only to realize that, or months or years, and only to realize that it was actually the thing that was escalating their spasms and making it worse. And it got a lot better once they stopped taking the nitric oxide. So if you're like some people have, if you're popping nitric oxide pills thinking, okay, just another one's going to fix it, you might want to dial that back and try going off of these pills just to see, is it actually the pills that are making it worse, not better? And if you keep feeling like you're worse and worse and worse and you can't figure out why, you may ask yourself, was I actually better before I started taking these pills? And for that reason, Stanford has sometimes um, refrained or not given people nitric oxide until after their operation, right? Because they've said that sometimes the nitric oxide can worsen the effect of a bridge. So again, there's no way to say for sure as a blanket statement because different people, it's just affected them differently. And I've seen on our website hundreds of people who said the nitric oxide works well, and other people, many, many others who said it was actually a problem for them. So it's just something to be aware of. Okay, so that's a look at the basics of myocardial bridges and how they cause endothelial dysfunction, which then causes vasospasms. And there's a lot to investigate with that because we can ask if there's more implications to that, but we can talk more about it on our site. I'll see you there.